We are back with Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, which is back up and running, thank God, Mr. Eric Kennedy. Eric, woo!
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
Yeah, well, you had some people on the ledge for a few days, so I noticed that I think a lot of us discovered we have an addiction. So
you have an addiction.
So if you want to address that real quick, just kind of tell people the little bit that you do know, which is still.
This is not much. The site went down starting. It was kind of weird. We were getting slower and slower and slower. So I was like, Gary, the site's getting really slow, and we thought there was a bot issue, and because we have been getting a lot of bot registrations lately. So it's good that we have the sign up process we have, which is manual, which I know people don't like, because that we manually accept people, but it prevents people from spamming the site like crazy. So we have to verify that they're a real person. So we get like 1,000 people bots registering a day now.
Oh, jeez.
So we thought originally it might have been something like that. The hosting company said it was a bot issue, and it wasn't. And it was a server issue, hard crash server issue. So that's what happened. And I was in the same boat as everybody else. I kept trying to refresh the page and going, damn it. And I'm thinking, well, I guess it's not going to be up today. It's not gonna be up today. So anyway, the only thing I can say is the one thing is when you don't have something there, maybe you'll learn to appreciate it a little more when it's not there. It's not there.
Right.
So maybe people won't be so mean. I don't know.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder. So there you go. Absolutely.
It's not easy. And for those of you guys out there that are like, this is a crappy run operation. Again, we're a mom and pop operation. We do this with the seat of our pants, basically out of not literally a basement, but we're not ESPN, we're not Fox, we're not, any of these NBC or anything like that. So we do what we can do.
Yeah. So speaking of what we can do, before we get started with this look at the upcoming free agent targets, what's in your cup today, or in your can, or your?
Well, I'm drinking out of the I drink and I know things pint, and I've got.
Nice.
I'm still finishing off the Japanese Sapporo. So
Nice.
I went to a Japanese restaurant recently, and my background was Japan, so I have a taste for Japanese beer. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, my son's currently stationed in Iwakuni, Japan.
Yeah.
So there. So a pint with a saying by a half pint.
By a half pint.
So nice.
Very
there
good.
You go.
Very good. Very good.
I'm sure I'll get hit with the people who think that's a bad thing to say.
Yeah.
I'm having. Nice. Don't make fun of the can. I'm having a cup of clouds. It is a New England style India pale ale. It is from Fam's Brewing Company. So it's a colorful can.
It looks like you're drinking out of a Hello Kitty can.
It has sort of a. It has sort of like a New England drunken high cloud thing, drinking a rainbow. I don't know what it means. It's an India Pale Ale. It's not my favorite, but we got a bunch of it. So
it'll help us to talk about the Giants. So we're self-medicated.
That it does. So first off, thank you to everyone who watched the last podcast. We had a number of new subscribers, so thank you. Can keep it going. We're not that far away where we can actually monetize our podcast, which would be great. It helps make all the things that we've done to keep this going, and things that we've added, and we're trying to make the thumbnails nice and pretty and all that good stuff. So with that being said, we are here to talk about the Giants free agency targets. We talked about the upcoming players for the Giants, which there weren't many for the Giants that we would even consider re-signing. So now we're looking at across the league, and let's start on the offensive side of the ball. And Eric, you already said for you, there's not a whole lot out there on the offensive side.
Yeah, and before we start this, I just wanted to mention, so I look back at Schoen and Dable's free agent periods for 2022, 2023, and 2024, and there's an interesting trend here. It's a trend, doesn't mean they're going to do it, but you look at the past, sometimes they'll predict the future. They have a history of only signing about 1 to 3 high-price free agents with multi-year deals, and they're always in the very first day. They're always in the first couple of days, and then everybody after that is only a 1-year deal. So in 2022, when they first came on board, They gave a 3-year deal, $18 million to Glowinski. They gave a 2-year deal to Tyrod Taylor, and then no other multi-year deal. All 23 other free agents were 1-year deals. 2023, big money right off the bat to Bobby Okereke, the 4-year, $40 million. And then they give Nunez Roches the 3-year, $12 million deal, and then 12 free agents after that 1-year deals. And you say, well, only 12. That year is the year they gave Daniel Jones $160 million, and they also re-upped, extended Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence. So they threw a lot of money that offseason on their own people. So those 3 were very, very expensive. And then
that also included we made a trade for Darren Waller during that time too. So that was also part of that acquisition.
Yes.
Just something to consider, because that will come into play this year.
So again, so 2 guys with multi-year deals in 2022, 2 guys with multi-year deals in 2023 from other teams.
Yeah.
And then in 2024, they broke with it a little bit because they had Runyon and Luminor and Schlottman. Schlottman, even though it was relatively cheap, he was 2 years, $3 million. But they had Runyon 3 years, $30 million. Luminor 2 years, $14 million. And then Singletary 3 years, $16.5 million. So they had 4, and then 21 1-year deals. So the reason I'm bringing this all up is John and I are probably going to be talking about guys that are going to be some of the more expensive players out there. Odds are the Giants at most might sign 3 of these guys, and then the rest of them will probably be 1-year contracts for guys that are like more mid to bottom tier guys that no one's even. So when you look at like Pete Prisco's top 100 or Fox Sports' top 100, most of the guys the Giants will sign won't be on those lists. They'll be more. Right. So my sense is right or wrong, Schoen does not like to spend a lot of money on other people's free agents. Now he did that with the one significant, in my opinion, like 3, I would say, significant counters to that was the Brian Burns, which was a trade. And they threw a ton of money at him. So the 3 top guys on the Giants roster right now in terms of money are Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and Andrew Thomas. By far, they're the only ones that account over $20 million each in the salary cap for this year. Then everybody else is below that. So Burns got a lot of money, but he was a trade. And then the only other ones was Okereke was a big deal, and Runyon was a big deal. So he doesn't like to throw money out. My opinion, he doesn't like to spend a lot on other teams' free agents. And so I'm thinking that they're not going to make a huge splash based on what they've done before, unless they're really panicking about their jobs and they're going to go counter to what they've already done. I would think that they might sign 1 or 2 guys on offense, and maybe 1 or 2 guys on defense. Big ticket guy.
And the thing to look at with this too is in 22 we had really no money. We had minimal amount of money,
and they were trying to cut $40 million.
And they were trying to move things around and whatever. And so take that out of the equation for the moment. 23, you already listed out who they signed.
Dexter, Jones, and Andrew Thomas, really expensive, and Bobby Okereke, really expensive.
But they made a trade as part of that offseason. That was Darren Waller.
Right.
Last year, as you already stated, they signed a number of guys. They made a trade for Brian Burns. I expect that the same thing's going to happen this year. The Giants are going to sign some players, and I do believe a trade is going to happen.
Right.
And if it's going to happen, like you said, it generally happens very quickly because, one, you need to know what you're working with. If the trade is of a significance of like I'm trading and I'm either bringing salary in, or as they did last year with Burns, you brought a guy in and had to give him a contract. So now you're giving a big deal. Again, we did the video on Matthew Stafford. So for the moment, I'll just use him as the example. If the Giants do bring him over, Stafford wants a new deal. So that means you're going to have to redo that. That's a thing that you need to do very early in free agency, thus to allow you the time to then adjust whatever else you're going to do. You just mentioned one thing that's also key to know about this. I think Brian Burns is the one contract that the Giants are probably going to play around with if they want to free up a bunch of money, minus cutting people. restructuring. Burns has where they could move money around and kick some of his down further down the road. And I don't know where Eric just went, but I'm hoping he's going to be right back.
Here, oh, are you still there? So
Screen.
yes, I
There we
agree.
go.
So I think, oh, you're back.
You
was
were
gone.
gone.
Okay.
I was here.
Okay, sorry.
You're fine. So yeah, so basically I was just saying that Burns is the guy that we could probably move money with. I do expect the Giants to make a trade for somebody. Keep that in mind. But for now, our focus is on free agents.
Right. Correct. Though the trades will, as you said, will affect the free agents.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And those rumors with Matthew Stafford are still out there. Now, other people are reporting it too. So again, the thing that's interesting is the salary cap is going to go up to about 280 million. So that may influence teams deciding whether or not they were going to keep or get rid of people based on what they thought the salary cap was going to be. So I don't know if that affects the Rams' decision or not at this point as well, too. So, but
yeah,
we'll
I really don't think the cap's going to have any effect on Matthew Stafford's situation with the Rams. I think the situation with the Rams is whether Matthew Stafford really wants to be there, and there's a big question of whether he does. The second part to that is whether the Rams want him to be there more than 1 year. So, if Stafford sounds like he's looking for his potentially last contract, the Rams don't sound like they want to give it to him. They don't want to give him another 3 years or 2 additional years on top of the year they're already on the hook for. I think that's going to come to a head. It seems like it's the fact that you see, who was it? Daniel Jeremiah. I think I got to look at one. Made a comment. Basically, he changed who the Giants were going to draft at number 3, and someone said, "Oh, you don't have a quarterback going there," and then he basically pointed back to Stafford as the reason why. Yeah, and Schefter's been talking about it, and I heard that basically there was a mention of a fallback, and it goes to what we talked about. If it wasn't Stafford, that Aaron Rodgers is on the horizon as a potential fallback. I think Rodgers is going to have options. But anyway,
all right, let's get into it.
For now, this is going to be free agents, those that we know are, and I think we can include some of the guys we expect to be released.
Yeah. So I don't know who you have on your list. I had way more on defense than offense. Way more. To me, the offense free agent market looks like crap. It looks like complete crap to me. I don't see a lot out there. The positions that I'm looking at that I know the Giants need help are quarterback, wide receiver, depth / competition on the offensive line, and we might need a tight end depending on what Theo Johnson's health situation is with that Liz Frank injury. I'm not thinking they're going to be high on free agency with a running back, given the fact that unless they have plans to get rid of Singletary, which I don't think they do. But and of course they got Tracy, and it's a very, very potentially historically good draft at running back. So I don't think the Giants are looking at running back in my opinion. So I want to get the ones out of the way that I don't see anybody. I tell you, John, I told you that I'd let Slayton walk, but the wide receiver market to me is awful. I mean, everyone's going to say there are 2 free agents in offense that everyone as a Giants fan would drool over. T. Higgins at wide receiver and Trey Smith at guard. To me are the ones, but those are the pipe dreams to me because they're going to be they're going to be guys that are going to get paid by really good teams, and why would they want to come to the Giants to me? So if I could just grab guys like my own sort of free agent draft, T. Higgins and Trey Smith are perfect for the Giants. I don't think we're going to be able to get them, but so I would love them, but I'm not this, and I'm going to name them because if we get one of them, I'm going to be very happy. But I don't see T. Higgins coming here. I don't see Trey Smith coming here. Given that, and assuming this is a free agents thing, assuming that we can't trade for Matthew Stafford, the only quarterback, and I was trying to put myself in the shoes of Schoen. If I was really Joe Schoen and I really had to sink or swim, what quarterback would I want to put my career, the fate of my fate in? And their names being thrown out there like Justin Fields, and I can see someone taking a flyer and saying, "Can we resurrect him?" But if I'm Shane and Dable, I'm not putting my fate in the hands of Justin Fields. I'm still hoping, if I'm them, that Derek Carr becomes available in getting Derek Carr, because if I went back and looked at his career numbers, recent career numbers, and he's still floating around 98, 100 passer ratings the last couple of years. His TD to interception ratio is still very good. And if you don't, and the problem I have with getting Aaron Rodgers is the age and the baggage. So I would not be against Rodgers for a 1-year deal. I have a hard time the Wellington Mirror signing off on him with all the baggage he has. And to me, Derek Carr seems like a very Kerry Collins-like move for them. And so that, again, not a great answer. But again, in terms of everybody's out there, I don't like the Pittsburgh guys. I don't like the Russell Wilson. I'm not Justin Fields. I could see taking a flyer on, but they're so dependent on the quarterback position for their survival. Do you really want to put your fate in the hands of Justin Fields? So Derek Carr was the one that stood out to me at quarterback. Do you want to go these by position and have you weigh in?
Yeah. So we can, sure. Let's
I got another guy I want to mention, but on offensive line.
Okay, so let's stay with the quarterbacks for a minute. I'll say this because I know we said we'll set it aside, but for 1 second, if the Giants do trade for Stafford, I have a feeling that it'll get hammered out at the combine. And the reason I believe that is in conjunction with what you were saying a minute ago about how there's very little at wide receiver. If the Giants are going to try to make a big splash, you're going to do two things. You're going to let's say Stafford's your big splash. You're going to bring him in. You can't have Neighbors have only Robinson and Hyatt as your other guys, knowing Slayton's leaving. There's got to be somebody else that takes the pressure off, because Neighbors can be your Jamar Chase, but he's got to have a T. Higgins on the other side. If you think you're going to take a shot at T. Higgins and it's going to be money, you better have a quarterback to entice that guy to want to be here.
That's correct. So the only way I see Higgins even remotely considering the Giants is if he knows Matthew Stafford.
Yes, I'm 100% with that. So that being said, if that's like you said, if that does not happen, then I've played around with it a few times. Sam Darnold is obviously the top tier of the free agent quarterbacks right now. Derek Carr is not a free agent currently, but we expect that he will be. But for the moment, Darnold. I can't see Darnold coming back to MetLife Stadium after his career went so badly with the Jets and wanting to play here. He's going to get an offer from somebody else. The Raiders are going to probably be on board there. Somebody for sure. God, the Steelers are a possibility. Their two guys are possibilities for us because they're not signed with the Steelers. The Steelers are going to need somebody. Darnold becomes a possibility for those guys. I mean, there's just a number of places that he could go. So I can't see him coming here. So as far as the free agent quarterbacks go, Justin Fields, I don't want it to happen, but I could see it happening. The two guys, and I know I'm going to get flamed for this. The two guys that I actually would be okay with, the first one, it's not Jameis Winston. I can't stand him. I don't want him on the team. He doesn't do us anything. I would take Marcus Mariota as just a guy. We're going to need he can run, he can throw. Maybe he resurrects his career a little bit. He looked decent with Washington
as a starter. You're looking as a starter.
We'd have to. Well, I assume I'm assuming we're drafting.
Right,
but using that, and then the other guy, and this is the one where the people are just going to totally shit on. I know is Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right, you mentioned that before. Yeah.
The other, I would say Carson Wentz too, but I have a very sneaking suspicion that he's going to re-sign with the Chiefs to just stay with that possibility that he could step in if something happened to Mahomes with a winning team. I don't think Carson Wentz wants the responsibility of carrying a team. He failed with Philadelphia he kind of got ushered out, failed with Indianapolis, didn't do anything with Washington. I think being a backup suits him, and I think he's fine with that. So I think he'll stay. But I think Garoppolo wants one more shot, and he does have a connection to Daboll.
Well, but you would still go with Aaron Rodgers, though.
If he's a possibility, absolutely. That's if you're not getting Stafford, I want Rodgers. I just don't see it happening. So okay. I was taking the guys that are technically, because Rodgers is being released.
See, if I'm Joe Schoen, and again, people may disagree with me. Again, I'm a draft guy, so everyone listening out there, I think the only way the Giants are going to fix the quarterback position long term is drafting a quarterback. What I'm talking right now is trying to get a transitional quarterback here to save. If I'm Schoen and Dable, I'm trying to save my job and try to make the Giants respectable. Respectable being somewhere around in a 500 season. So if I'm doing that and I'm thinking for the future, I'm really wary about trading away draft capital for Matthew Stafford for a 2-year deal for a guy who's going to be here 2 years. That's why I would think about somebody like Derek Carr and then draft my quarterback either this year or next year. That's my long-term guy. That's my quarterback plan. And that's why I'm looking at Derek Carr. If I'm Schoen, I'm not trading away unless I can get Matthew Stafford relatively cheap. I don't think I'm doing that. Again, I think Matthew Stafford can play. And I know Giants fans are tired of losing, but again, I'm thinking beyond this year or next year. I got to think about what am I doing long term too. So is the gap between Carr and Matthew Stafford so great that I would start trading away a lot of picks for? I just wouldn't do that. That's where I'm going. All right. So, but I'm assuming Matthew Stafford's going to be here. So the Derek Carr thing.
That's my assumption as well. Is I have a sneaking feeling the Giants are. I think the deal has already been worked out. I think it's just now trying to figure out some of the other pieces. Too many people have chimed in a way that's it, and you're not hearing it like you're not hearing the chatter about other teams. You're hearing it about the Giants, and then either the Rams keeping him or not. I think the Rams keeping him or the ticket price supposedly someone leaked out was a first-round pick. I think that's just semantics. That's just trying to build up a thing. They've already been talking about this. This goes back to the fall. I got a weird feeling. It's just too many things are lining up that say that this is true.
Right. And I should have prefaced my comments with this. I know Derek Carr is not a free agent right now, everyone, but I'm assuming he's going to be released.
Yes.
So that's my assumption is he's going to be released. If he's not released, then I might look at Justin Fields. But again, I'm looking more to the draft in this situation, either this year or next year. So right. Wide receiver. Oh my God, was it bad? I didn't realize. So T. Higgins again. Everyone's number one receiver easily. The question is for him: does he want to come to the Giants with a coach who's on the hot seat with a team that right now doesn't have a quarterback? Matthew Stafford could change that.
Right.
Also on a team that Malik Neighbors gets, at least last year, got thrown to an inordinate number of times. And so T. Higgins might be thinking, and his agent might be thinking, they're going to force feed Neighbors a lot again. Even if we're there, maybe this isn't the best situation. Again, so, okay, if I could come out with one guy on offense, pipe dream, it would be T. Higgins or Trey Smith. But I'm assuming. So then I was looking at the other guys, and Chris Godwin's more of a slot receiver who's coming off an injury, and he's had an injury history. So I think he's going to get way more than I would spend.
Yep.
Everyone's connecting, not rumor-wise, but I'm just saying people that are projecting Stephon Diggs with the Giants because of Dable's connections with him. But he's coming off an ACL that he suffered in late October. I still would not be shocked if the Giants signed Stephon Diggs as a transition player. I wouldn't be shocked. But looking down the list, John, did you see anybody else that like their names popped up?
Yeah. So popping out, no. The first thing, I'm going to start with the Diggs thing because I keep seeing it, and I feel like that's just someone taking.
Yes.
Daboll was the coach, and I'm connecting them.
But Dable's done that, though.
And that's true.
Remember,
and that's true, but he should not be the guy making these decisions.
Right.
So that's the part. That's why you have
Raymond Schoen was in Buffalo, too.
Well, that's why you have player personnel guys. That's why you have, and they give you supposedly the process. Okay. Right. Diggs is going to be 31 years old, right? He's going to be 31 years old.
He's declining.
He wore out his welcome in 2 different locations. In Houston, he didn't really ingratiate himself with Stroud that well. There was some friction there a little bit. Then he got injured, and he just at the back end of his last season with Buffalo, he tailed off dramatically.
Right. So well, they cut bait on him,
and to come off an ACL for a team that is constantly injured. We don't need to bring a guy in with a pre-existing injury and hope that he's not going to get injured. I really hope that this is not. This is just people connecting dots because it's familiar versus I have inside information. I think so. My thought is Diggs is not anybody I want any part of, but could I see it? Unfortunately, I could.
Yeah.
T. Higgins, obviously,
Right. Number one, right?
stands out.
He's your number one
No,
guy.
he's number one. Number
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
So here's one though that I am going to say. My only concern is that he physically doesn't bring a difference to a lot of what we already have. He's kind of just right around the same thing. But he's a guy I think we could get cheaper because he missed a good portion of this year, has been a home run threat. And if you give him a guy who can throw the ball, a Stafford, I think he could really light it up opposite of Neighbors, and that is Hollywood Brown, who was with the Ravens, went to the Cardinals, went to the Chiefs, got injured early in the season, came back at the end of the season, showed a lot of stuff at the end of the season in a very limited amount of time. I think Marquise Hollywood Brown would be a good speed option on the other side of Neighbors. You still got Robinson in the middle, and hopefully Hyatt develops into something. But you also got to look to the draft. I'm not counting on Hyatt.
Yeah.
So I got Brown, and then I'm going to go with Josh Palmer of the Chargers.
Okay.
He hasn't really lived up to the expectations that the Chargers had for him, but I think he could still be a very he's at least an equal to Slayton, but I think he has better hands and a little bit more physical size to be that intermediate guy where Slayton was more of a distance guy. So I think you could get some out of there. But you're right. I mean, other than that, and here's the other caveat. If the Giants get Matthew Stafford, then you want to look at Cooper Kupp's going to get released. So you got to expect that that's a possibility. But let's say they don't go that route. Kupp goes somewhere else. Then that's possible. Buffalo is a place that I could see Kupp going and being a third down guy for Josh Allen. Then you got to look at guys like Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson, other Rams receivers that did pretty well, because if you're coming to an offense where the quarterback is learning the offense, then I want a receiver that, although he's got to learn this particular offense, he knows the quarterback. So he knows his cadence. He knows his rhythm. He knows the look-offs and the throws. And I'm going to want one of those guys on my team.
But the options, again, I want to also, we've been getting comments in the YouTube thread that I have a horrible tendency to interrupt you. So if I do that, remember we have an air horn. And you do that for me.
Okay.
But we're in agreement. I don't want to put words in your mouth. It's not a good group with wide receivers, right?
No.
I was trying to find somebody. I give you credit for digging out the names that you just did. And those would be, again, as I was saying in the top of the broadcast, those are going to be the lower tier guys that they might be the 1 year deal that they take a flyer on. But you'd be hard pressed saying, so what I'm trying to look and vision at, John, is I want weapons that the other team are scared of. Hyatt was supposed to be that. We know Neighbors can do that. Book's still out on Wan'Dale Robinson. We'll have to see. But we need guys that scare other teams. And a lot of the names they were either guys that like Amari Cooper that are towards the, they're too old, or they were like Keenan Allen. There were guys like that. And I'm like, no, and they just don't fit the Giants. Could they come in and help us? Yeah, but they didn't inspire me. So anyway, so we want to move on to tight end?
Yeah. So the only thing I would say is there's one other thing for wide receiver that I would what I would also consider is right now, we talked about this. The Giants don't have a returner under contract. You have Smith is going to be a free agent. Gunner, since he's a free agent. So
they did sign the guy off the practice squad of the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a returner. So they do have that guy.
So, but if you want a guy who can kind of, you would prefer to have a guy who can play two positions. You want him to be a positional player and a returner. Then a McCole Hardman of the Chiefs is someone to consider. Again, we're talking later in free agency.
Right.
You bring him in on a 1 year deal. He's your fourth or fifth wide receiver, and he's your number one returner. So look for somebody like that as well. But I think that's kind of. Why don't we jump though real quick? And you probably don't even have anybody because I barely could find three possible tight ends. Because
tight ends is terrible, and it's not just you and me saying this. I was trying to, again, how I researched this is I was looking at other people's lists too and getting their opinions on this, and everybody seems to be in agreement that the tight end class is awful. And combine that with the fact that the tight end class in the draft is actually pretty good, pretty deep.
Yeah,
I don't see anybody there unless they're really concerned about Theo Johnson, which they might, and they want to bring another maybe. Tyler Conklin is out there from the Jets, and he's a decent blocker. He's been hampered by bad quarterbacking, maybe just to stabilize the thing, but I wouldn't do it. Unless I can get somebody really cheap. I mean, Gesicki's out there, but he's more of a glorified wide receiver.
And the rumor is that if Travis Kelce does not come back, that the Chiefs are going to be all in on trying to get Gesicki on the team. So that's kind of,
and he would do really well in that team.
Yeah.
And if you're him, do you go to the Giants or do you go?
Oh yeah, I mean, and he brings absolutely nothing as a blocker. Absolutely,
no, he's not.
Nothing.
He's a wide receiver, basically.
I mean, he would make Darren Waller look like Howard Cross.
I even looked at some of his highlights just to refresh my memory, and I'm like, damn, he's small. He's not built like a tight end.
No. I mean, we're not exactly talking. He's a wide receiver. He's a bulked up wide receiver. The only other thing to consider at tight end, and it's going to sound counterintuitive, like why would you do the one thing I'm about to say and then sign somebody? But if the Giants wanted to clear cap space, they could release Bellinger, who frees up over $3 million on the cap, and he just doesn't seem to be in their plans anymore. And then sign a guy, but if you do, you're just signing a guy to be the third tight end. And the only guy I can think of, there was three that I came up with: Hunter Long, Irv Smith, but the third one is the one that I actually think they might consider, and that's Tommy Tremble of Carolina, because he's 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He has some untapped potential. He can block a little bit. He can receive. So he would be a Bellinger equal. And when you sign a guy like that, their first year, you basically can make their contract nothing, and you put it on the back end. So they would save the $3 million from Bellinger. I don't think they'll do that. The Giants have enough cap space and maneuverability with Burns' contract and even with Lawrence or with Thomas's contracts to free up a ton of money. So I can't see that they would cut Bellinger at a position that they're very thin at.
No, I don't think they would do that. And the problem is Theo Johnson's Liz Frank injury. So I don't think they're going to do that. And if Bellinger was out there, he'd be one of the guys I would say, hey, you might want to take a flight. The irony is this. People are going to laugh their ass off at me on this one. If you were looking at this as a non-Giants team and you were looking at these same positions, some of the guys that you would take a flyer on to see if you could resurrect their career, or they've shown flashes and you might want to. One is Daniel Jones.
Oh my God.
But if you weren't the Giants and you were looking at the court, that's how bad the quarterbacks are.
Well, here's how bad it is. And I just stepped on you. Right. Here's how bad it is. I did see someone posted that one of the targets that the Steelers may have, if they cannot get one of the two guys they have, is Daniel Jones.
And he might work out.
But if you're the Steelers, why the hell, after you watch Jones basically hand you the game against an overmatched Giants team who's in this game, until Daniel Jones decided to fumble and throw a shitty interception? And that's the guy that you want to come in.
And the other thing is I've been on board with you about let Darius Slayton walk, but Darius Slayton, in terms of his age, speed, flashes of good play. Now we know he disappears, and we've said it's time to move on and find your truth.
Yeah, I love that. Go live your truth somewhere else, buddy.
But if I'm looking as if I'm not the Giants and I'm looking at the wide receivers, to me, Darius Slayton's one of the more underrated. So after I looked at the wide receiver market, I'm not so sure I don't bring back Darius Slayton if I can get him reasonable right now. So I know people are contradicting. They're going to say, Eric, you're contradicting yourself. But that was before I looked at the free agent market wide receiver. It's bad. I mean, the free agent wide receivers are bad. All right, so we're on tight end, so we want to keep this going. Offensive line. So there was one guy.
Before, because there's more in offensive line. The only other position, because I don't think we're going to touch it, so we'll just say real quick, running back.
I'm not signing anyone in running back.
I'll say this. It depends to me on what the Giant quarterback. See, here's the thing that I think a lot of people just really don't understand. Oh, where did you go? Well, wait for you to pop back in there. But to me,
still
is
here.
you just got back. I brought you back. Yeah,
Here we
you were
go
off
again. The
screen, and I brought you
technical
back again.
ability keep following
It's
us.
fine. It's fine.
The bots are attacking.
So here's right. So here's the one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about the quarterback position in terms of what it's going to do to the Giants overall. What they do and who they do it with is going to determine almost every other thing that they do. If the Giants get Matthew Stafford, you have a quarterback who's not going to run. So you're going to frame your offense around
Right.
much more of a pass happy offense, and your running game is going to be your backs and the blockers for the backs.
Maybe you get Justin Fields.
If it's
totally
Justin
different.
Fields, now
Totally
you go
different.
in a different direction.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you might start to see them lean towards a more Ravens type offense where you get a guy who they basically play an offensive lineman at fullback.
Right.
And I could see a guy in the draft, Willie Lampkin out of North Carolina. I could see that guy getting drafted, or the Giants go and get a big fullback to say, we got to make, because we're going to run borderline a quarterback running back running combo with
Right.
some passing. So it really depends on what happens there that dictates everything else. So running back wise, I think the Giants are kind of set. You got Tracy. Tracy better control those damn fumbles though, or he's going to find it. That's his big thing.
I think they'll take a flyer in the draft again.
I think you're right.
Tracy's a really low draft pick, so I really like him.
I agree.
But if he didn't work out, it's not the end of the world.
True. And quite frankly, Tiki Barber had a massive fumbling problem until he didn't. And he was still so you don't give up on talent right away that.
Yeah.
Devin Singletary is the question mark because he's kind of expensive for a guy who but then you have Eric Gray who's done nothing so far and the Giants really haven't used him. So free agent wise, there was just 4 guys that I would even consider, and it depends on what they want to do. AJ Dillon, because it would be nice if we had a back who was completely different than the other backs.
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody who was just a big bruising fullback or power back who could get you those short yardage, pick up the tough yards when you want to, or pound a defense when you're trying to run the clock. And then the other options were Javonte Williams, Rico Dowdle out of Dallas, but he's really just like any of our other backs. He's more of a change of pace guy. And then the guy who's always been kind of a bane in our existence is Kenneth Gainwell. You could steal him from the Eagles and bring him in, but I think he'll have options elsewhere. But I think I'll say, and you tell me if you agree, I don't think I see the Giants going free agent running back. They'll draft a guy. I
think, like I said, they're going to sign 2 to 4 free agents to multi-year deals, and everyone else is going to be a 1-year cheapie. So if you think you can get a guy for 1 year on a relatively minimum type deal, he's certainly in the conversation. But if I'm the Giants, I'm not spending my free agent multi-year deal contracts on a running back. On offense, it's quarterback and offensive line, and wide receiver would have been there if there was wide receiver. And then most of it, we'll get to but defense, there's a bunch of good players and there's a bunch of needs on defense. That's where I'm spending my money other than quarterback. So it would be nice if you had all the money in the world and all the cap space in the world. Yeah, I would bring in another, but I think you can get another running back in the draft, and
agreed.
The draft is really good.
It's deep at running back.
Yeah. So they could probably get another Tyrone Tracy type potential starter or in the 5th or 6th round in this draft, because I think the running backs are going to get pushed way back in this draft.
If you think about it too, right? There's 2 very opposite draft trends in terms of draft trend success. Quarterbacks tend to be drafted in the 1st round, and they're you don't hear a ton. We get a few here and there.
Right.
But the bulk of the quarterbacks that get drafted and are successful are 1st round draft picks.
Right.
Running backs, on the other hand, you can see 4th, 5th, 6th round guys, sometimes undrafted free agents. They come in, and it's just a matter of they might have a skill set that fit the offense that you're running and your offensive line, and it just worked for them. Yeah. Where in college, it wasn't designed around what they could do. They had to fit into what the offense did. So you can find guys later at running back, unlike you can at quarterback.
And we're not a running team, so at least we haven't been. So I just don't think they're going to do that. So offensive line, ready to move on offensive line? All right. Please. So obviously the question here is this. Everyone's going to say, Andrew Thomas is an unknown because of the injury history. Completely agree. And there are some left tackles out there. But I'm operating on the Giants they're spending a fortune on Andrew Thomas. They don't have the luxury of spending left tackle money on another left tackle right now and thinking about moving people. So I'm not looking at any of the left tackle. Fingers crossed. Need to think about swing tackle, that type of situation, but I'm not doing that. So I'm assuming they're going to have Andrew Thomas at left tackle, Illuminor at right tackle. We've got Schmitz, but they might want to have somebody compete with him. Schlottman is a guy that's still on the roster that they signed to a 2-year deal last year. He missed all the season because he got hurt until the final game. They brought him back for the final game, but Schlottman's still on the thing. So we have Runyon at guard, and I'm not sold on, and I don't think many people are sold on Van Roten coming back. So do you believe in Evan Neal being able to play right guard? Or do you believe in Azudu being able to play right or left guard and then you shift Runyon? I'm nervous about that. If I could get him, I'd bring in Trey Smith and make my line potentially awesome. I would that,
Right,
but I don't
right.
think they're going to be able to do that. So I was looking at the other guards that are out there because I want somebody on my team. I'm not handing it to Evan Neal. Or Azudu. I want somebody in there competing. Will Fries missed most of the season with the Colts, so he broke his tibia, and I think he's a more of a blue collar, overachiever type. Think a better Glowinski, but he's still the Glowinski type of guy. There are a number of guys that are 33, 34-year-olds that you might want to look at as stopgaps if you don't believe in Neal, that might come a little cheaper at the end of their career, like Zach Martin. Believe it or not, Kevin Zeitler you could return to the Giants. Brandon Scherf is still out there. But the one guy that stood out to me was a versatile backup guy who has started on the Ravens, a really good Ravens line, and that's Patrick McCarry. He has played left tackle, right tackle, guard, and center. He's played every position on the offensive line, and the Raven players love him. They love the guy. He's probably not an ideal starter, but he's the guy that I can play and put in any situation and be okay with. So if Schmitz struggles, you can play him at center. If Andrew Thomas, God forbid, gets hurt again and you don't want to shift to Illuminor again, you can play him at left tackle. Or maybe you want to shift to Illuminor, you can play him at right tackle. So to me, he was kind of one of those guys that he's probably not going to cost a fortune. I'm afraid the Ravens might re-sign him because they realize how valuable he is as a reserve. But to me, he's the perfect kind of lineman for the Giants to sign right now as an insurance policy for Neal, Azudu, and Schmitz. Oh, and Andrew Thomas too. So you can plug him almost anywhere.
Sure.
When I came out of my free agent wish list for the Giants, if I can't get Smith and I can't get Higgins, which I don't think they're going to be able to do, I came out of I circled Derek Carr at quarterback and Patrick McCarry as a jack of all trades guy that you can plug in anywhere. So that was the one guy that I really liked.
So a lot depends. You mentioned it more than once. A lot depends on, are the Giants going to move Neal to guard to even let him compete at guard, or are they going to start at tackle and then use guard as a fallback? But if his guard is a fallback, that means you need a guard because you don't right now. Van Roten's not signed, and you don't really know Kubis. I don't think you're going into the season counting Kubis can be a starter. You're saying he's got to work through this offseason. So you can't so it really comes down to how you're going to do that. Now, I think you mentioned one thing that's very important. I think Thomas at left tackle, Illuminor, and I said it from the minute that it happened, Illuminor should have gone to left tackle. They didn't want to make all these changes and whatever, but he was the more natural tackle than putting Azudu out there and whatever. So I think if you've got a right tackle who can play left tackle, and the draft is heavy in tackle, I think we avoid tackle as far as free agency goes. Guard wise, I actually think we're going to look at guys like James Daniels from Pittsburgh. He's 27 years old.
I looked at him too.
Trey Smith, I love. I would love it, but I think
He'd be perfect. He'd be perfect for the Giants.
the
He'd be
cost
perfect.
is just, I think
Yeah.
it's just going to be too much. Aaron Banks, San Francisco, 27 years old, a guy, a very run heavy team. So we know he can run. I don't know how well he can pass block in a more traditional pat where the 49ers are they play off the run. It's a more of a quick tempo kind of passing game. The Giants are a little different. And we don't even know who the quarterback is at the moment. But I think Aaron Banks, he brings some size to form. He was a Notre Dame guy. I think he brings some size. I like him. And then the other guy, Mekhi Becton is out there. I just can't see the Giants doing it. He's basically Evan Neal.
That's what he said. I said the same thing. I said that's like signing Evan Neal.
Yeah, we just move Evan Neal then because we've already got him and he's costing us a lot.
Right.
So then the other guy I'm thinking is Evan Brown out of Arizona, and that's another guard. Now, if we look center, these guys could push to be starters. I doubt they would want to just come as backups. Then you've got Nick Harris out of Cleveland, Josh Myers out of Green Bay, and then Drew Dahlman out of Atlanta. None of those.
Dahlman's going to get.
Yeah, none of those are guys that I think the Giants are just going to rush out and try to get. So
the only way I see them signing a center that can start and be a good starter is if they've given up on Schmitz, and I don't think they've given up on Schmitz.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So when I was looking at the centers, I was thinking if they're gonna bring in another center, it's gonna be like the guy that I just mentioned, Macari, who can play multiple positions, or it's gonna be like a guy like Schlottman, a backup who can start, but you don't ideally want him to. Because why else would they come? Because some starting caliber center is not going to come here unless you say we're give you the starting job.
Right.
They're not going to come here and say, well, you got to compete for the starting job. They'll say, oh, I can get paid someplace else. I'm not. Again, remember, the salary cap went way up. So the offensive prospects stink, and the ones that are out there are going to be overpriced as they are because everybody got more money now. And the Giants are only mid-tier in salary cap. So there are half the teams in the league have more salary cap than us.
But they do have more space now. I did look it up, and they're closer to $50 million now versus where they were. Effective space is still a little less. Them both.
But if they get Stafford, though.
Well, that's the thing. Well, that's where I was going to go with that. They're here, right? They're at 13 or something like that as cap space. 14 is the Rams. They're like right together. Yeah. Two other names to consider though, and I think to watch one of them specifically. If you want a tackle guard combination, a guy who can play either one and has a connection to Dayball, is Cody Ford, who's currently with Cincinnati, but was with Buffalo. He's a free agent.
Yeah.
And then if we get Matthew Stafford, I'm ringing that Matthew Stafford bell again. Then Alaric Jackson of the Rams, a tackle but who could play guard. And he's only, how old is he? He is 27 years old. So he's a younger guy. So if the quarterback is going to drive a lot of what we do because we might need to change the kind of offensive lineman we have. It's different when you have a Jones who's going to run a lot, and that's kind of how we built the team. If you get a Matthew Stafford who's not going to run a lot, we don't need to be guys who can be so mobile, moving out and running and maybe pulling with the quarterback. I need a guy who can pass block.
Their hands are a little bit tied by the Runyon thing, though. Runyon's not really a run blocker; he's more than a pass blocker.
Does Runyon have any? Does he have any center capability? I feel like I've read somewhere where he has
Well, Van Roten was playing center for them for a while. Wasn't Runyon playing some snaps for a little bit in camp? Just for
I thought so. For some reason,
I'd have to go back and check that. I think they were all, but I don't think I don't get the sense they've given up on Schmitz. So that's a whole other conversation. But I think for better or worse, I don't want to go into another season having to rely on Zudu and Neal as my backup tackles. So this is how bad.
Which is funny because Neal was
how bad is they were supposed to be starters.
Yeah, he was supposed to be the starting tackle.
And you asked the question. I think they've got to go into training camp putting Neal. This is now when I would put Neal at guard. So I've made excuses in the past that I consider viable excuses that they couldn't make the move because he was hurt or something was going on at the position. They don't have the excuse, and he doesn't have the excuse now. They should go into the offseason saying, we're going to try you at guard. Tackle hasn't worked. We're going to try you at right guard, and we're going to go from there. And if he can't handle guard, then he's out of the league. So, and
Yeah.
that's why I would bring in somebody who can compete with him. But they got to get a swing tackle either in the draft, or they've got to get a veteran that like Illuminor last year who can kind of handle that. So that's why your Ford or somebody who has had some experience at tackle is a good. I was looking at those guys, but no, I didn't see anybody that jumped off. The problem is the offensive line player across the league is awful. It's most teams aren't the Philadelphia Eagles. Most teams have real issues, or the Lions have a really good offensive line. Most teams don't have good offensive lines, so everybody's kind of in the same boat. When they lose a starter, their backups aren't good. That's why McCarry stood out to me, because the starting line of the Ravens loves him. They're like, we consider him like, so invaluable, because when anyone goes down, he comes in and plays.
Well,
and I love the fact that he can play center.
The key to offensive line building, in all honesty, is you've got to hit on the draft picks when you have the draft picks, and then the free agents fill the gap and make it a solid line, and then you have depth that come up. The Eagles have depth coming up. They have multiple younger guys now moving into positions. So you lose a Jason Kelsey, and you basically just move a Landon Dickinson in, and you just go right on.
And they've done that on the defensive line too.
And that's you're absolutely, and that's the thing with the Giants, where I think what people really lose track of is, I don't think the Giants have drafted poorly per se. It's not the 1990s where Cedric Jones was way overdrafted and the Giants drafted Thomas Lewis. Thomas Lewis, during that draft, when I watched, a wide receiver, if you don't remember,
who the hell is this guy?
Out of Indiana. So, and I know what I'm about to say. This guy is not the end all be all of draft stuff. But I had Mel Kiper's thick book, and and I'm with a bunch of my friends who are all not Giants fans. Okay, I'm the only Giant fan in the group, and I'm like ready. And all of a sudden, the Giants named Thomas Lewis their first round pick. I'm flipping through, not the draft guide in general. I'm flipping through the wide receivers until I found the 22nd ranked wide receiver, not the 22nd ranked player, the 22nd ranked wide receiver. The Giants drafted him in the first freaking round.
In all the draft guides, he was down in the 20s.
Oh my God. I was like, my friends were like,
I saw that he was like a star in some all-star game in Florida for like,
Jesus.
I was like, oh my God. So anyways,
let's
say, because we got more defensive guys. We should.
So my point is, with the Giants offensive line draft, they've taken guys that have been highly scouted, highly expected to go very high in the draft. They just have failed. Now, Azudu was maybe a little early, but not too early where they got him. But Neal, he just so far he's failed. I mean, he's just failed as a tackle, whether it's injury or ability. I don't know which one of it is, or if it's a combination of both, but he's failed. John Michael Schmitz, it's questionable. Is he a starter? Yes. He might be one of the 32 best centers in the NFL, but that could be 31 or 32. I don't know. But as far as a second round draft pick, you don't know. So that's what's hurt the Giants the most. And then you have Andrew Thomas, the fourth guy taken in the 2020 draft. He's your franchise left tackle, but ever since you made him a franchise left tackle, he's been injured.
Right.
So that has really killed us. You can't build a team if you're constantly signing free agents to be starters, because your draft picks just aren't working out.
The Shane's big Achilles heel to date is he can't draft offensive linemen. So every offensive lineman they have drafted so far has not worked out. So they did not draft anybody last year, but the Azudu, Neal, Schmitz picks haven't worked out as hoped, and McKeithen, who's now gone. So they haven't worked out. So let's summarize here. So you got what's your top three guys in offense?
So
not assuming they're not getting Higgins and Schmitz. So
okay, so top three guys period on offense. Assuming I know in my heart I believe the Giants are getting Matthew Stafford, but let's just say for shits and giggles purposes they don't. Then at quarterback, at this point, I kind of think it's going to be Marcus Mariota. It's either going to be for me, it's Mariota or Garoppolo at quarterback. At wide receiver, obviously Higgins is the guy, but you just said let's pretend because he's the most sought after guy. Period. In free agency, he will be and we don't even know as far as we know, the Bengals might tag him. So I actually want Marquise Brown. at wide receiver. So that would be my other one. And then moving to offensive line, the guy that I really want like right away, I kind of feel I'm really leaning towards Aaron Banks. I think Aaron Banks at guard, depending on now if the Giants say right away, as they should, Evan Neal is going to be playing guard, we're moving him to guard, then that kind of takes the need to sign a guard per se. I might want the guard tackle, and then it'd be Cody Ford.
Okay. I'm spending most of my resources other than quarterback on defense and free agency, kind of what Anak did on BBI. He had a really good
we got to go through we got to go through all the defense.
Oh, okay, yeah. Which we do, but I'm prefacing my offense.
Okay.
So I'm only really looking at if they didn't get Stafford, I'm hoping Carr gets released and I'm signing Carr, and then I'm signing Patrick McCarry. And then I'm punting on everything else, using the draft for the rest of the offense, other than low price free agents that just fill out the depth chart. That's what I'm doing. I have a funny feeling we will end up with Stephon Diggs. I think I just have a funny feeling it's going to happen.
You're killing me, Smalls. You're killing me.
I wouldn't. But to be honest with you, when you look at the list of guys that are out there, Everyone after T. Higgins has injury, age, or quite hasn't lived up to expectations. Everyone's got a problem, and Diggs is one of those guys that maybe you get a year out of him. So, and he knows Dable. Dable knows him, Shane. So again, I'm not saying I would do it.
I know. So wait, I know the answer to this question, or at least I think I know. Have you seen the movie Tremors?
Yes. One of my wife's favorite movies.
Perfect. In the movie Tremors, when basically they're talking about having a plan, he's like, run! He goes, running's not a plan. He goes, running's what you do when a plan fails. To me, if you sign Stephon Diggs, that means whatever plan you gave to John Mara when you went in to explain why you should come back failed, and you went and signed Stephon Diggs.
Remember, the plan is if you believe they're going after Matthew Stafford, they think they're a quarterback away from competing. I mean, seriously, they think the roster is good enough, because if they don't think that, then Matthew Stafford makes no sense.
Listen, I'm all about people with needs, being given a chance, but I don't want a one-legged wide receiver with a bad attitude. Okay? I just don't.
Look, and the other thing is why I think is because Dable knows Diggs. So I mean, remember, he directly coached him.
True. No, you're spot on. You're spot on.
So anyways, the wide receiver marks. All right, defense. So defense was where I was like, whoa, that guy's interesting. That guy's interesting.
Yep.
There are so many people. I'm not even going to name them all. I'm starting off with the defensive line. There are three technique tackles that would be good fits next to Dexter Lawrence, and the one guy that makes me a little bit more nervous, but he has the size I like, and he's he's played well for the Lions recently, but they really think he's set to explode. Is Levi? I'm going to butcher this name. Owen Rookie. I can't do that.
I know who you're talking about.
Rookie, So, and the other one I can do, because we had a giant with the same name, Osa Odigizua.
Odigizua. Yes.
And Milton Williams. So there are three technique tackles that popped off to me right off the bat. And the Lions guy has more size. I went back and watched commentary from Lions fans on even going back to training camp. And I think he's primed to be – he was a second-round draft pick. He missed all of 2022 with a back injury. That scared me a little bit. But he has really started to come on. And I think if you put him next to Dexter Lawrence, I would spend money on him. And then, of course, Milton Williams is going to get a lot of pub from his postseason, including the Super Bowl performance. He really stood out for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit nervous about overrating guys based on Super Bowl performances. We've seen that in the past, where guys have really shined in the Super Bowl. They've signed free agents someplace and they bombed. Dallas had that corner against Pittsburgh years ago that Neil O'Donnell just threw 2 interceptions to.
Larry Brown.
Yeah.
Larry got a big contract.
It's an awful contract. But I think Milton Williams is a good player. And Osa Odigizua, A little less excited. I think he would do well next to Dexter in a better system. The only thing with both Williams and Odigizua, they're not run players. So, and we've had issues with run defense. These are guys. These are upfield attack guys. That's why Levi interests me a little bit more. And now, if we want to have a reunion, one of the names that popped off to me is. And this is, I think I watched the wrong games, but every time I see the Bengals, BJ Hill still can play. So BJ Hill would be one of those guys that I wouldn't spend a lot of money on, but if you can get him to come back here, and again, he's older. He's not, I don't put him in the same category, but I still, and maybe it's the games I watch, but I'm like, damn, I wish we didn't let go of him because I think the guy can still play.
I don't disagree. I see zero chance that he comes back and plays for the Giants.
No,
he can't be. He can't be overly.
He can't be
thrilled.
happy with them.
He was traded for Billy Price. Just looking at it that way.
Gettleman did that, right? Was Gettleman? Gettleman.
Yeah, that would have been Gettleman. Yeah. I'm with you on the defensive tackles. Here's the thing, though. I actually don't think the Giants can sign any defensive tackles.
Oh, I do. You don't really think so?
No, and the reason I don't think so is because the draft is deep at defensive tackle. I think you can get guys cheaper in the draft, and they can be the situational, rotational guys next to Lawrence. I think they're still going to look for another lineman, but I think it's going to be more of a traditional 3-4, 5 technique kind of guy, because we don't have that guy. You've got Burns and Thibodeau. Neither one of them are actually. I mean, we throw the word edge around, and it's really confusing. Are we a 3-4 defense or are we a 4-3? And if we're a 4-3, those two guys are the ends or edges out there. If we're a 3-4, then we need 3 traditional linemen to be playing physical, which is why I think we're sort of in between both. We're not one or the other. And I think that's why we have such a shitty run defense. It's because you just don't, we're not really designed to stop the run.
That's the problem is I'm making my predictions based on the defense not changing. And if they change the defense, like you're saying, then this changes. So I don't know. Because they're not going to sit Burns and they're not going to sit Thibodeau.
No, and I think you can see, look to Tennessee the last couple of years that Bowen was the defensive coordinator there. They had a very strong 2-man interior and then outside. And you had guys like, I think Harold Landry at one point was the outside guy. Bud Dupree was out there at one point. I mean, so that we can do a Tibbs Bird. You need 2 guys that are really more that interior guy. They had a Simmons, their big interior guy. We have Lawrence, and then we have nothing.
Well, that's why I think they're going to sign somebody in free agency, and they're going to draft somebody. I think they need 2. I think they need 2 guys.
I think we go the other way, unless we're planning to draft Carter at 3, and that's only assuming he's there, by the way.
Which is looking less likely.
Or you go James Pierce if you trade down, or maybe Scrouton or whatever if you go a little bit lower. I think you got to get a guy that can come in and play the run a little bit because Burns is thin and Thibodeau and Thibodeau gets injured every year. He's been nicked a little bit. So I'm kind of thinking don't discount Chase Young as a possibility. Josh Sweat's going to get a lot of money from somebody else. So I don't see that, but he would be a guy that I would consider. Hassan Reddick is another guy that I would consider to bring in as another. You got to get to the quarterback.
But do you think those guys? I interrupted you. Wait a minute.
No. That's not. No. That was a legit question.
I don't see them. I don't see those guys coming to a team where Thibodeau and Burns are already there. I don't see that. First of all, it's a money issue. Those guys are going to get paid. So
potentially, yes.
So they're going to get paid. And I don't see guys like Sweat and Reddick coming here because they don't want to share snaps. I don't see them playing those 3 guys at the same time.
There are 2 other guys.
Okay.
Joe Tryon.
Okay.
Guy with Tampa. All right. And then Peyton Turner of New Orleans.
Okay.
These are guys that they've done it, but they haven't done it. They're not going to command big money. They would fall into the Azeez Ojulari kind of grouping of maybe they get a contract, maybe they don't.
What about like Chauncey Golston, like that, like with the Cowboys, like borderline starter, that kind of thing.
I think we have a severe need of another guy next to
Oh,
Lawrence.
no doubt.
And
But
I feel like the draft is where that's going to happen.
that's where I do too.
Yeah, there's too
Sorry.
many guys there, and you can get them cheaper. And I also think we can get more of them. If you sign a guy here, you're now pretty much relegated to, if you draft a defensive tackle, you're probably now looking third, fourth round, because you don't want the first or second round contract at tackle when you just signed another guy and you got a really expensive Lawrence. So I think you want to leave yourself open, and the draft is deep at defensive tackle.
Okay.
Let that come to you. But yeah,
You said you want more disagreements. I'm going to disagree. I think they sign a defensive tackle and they draft a defensive tackle, and I think they could draft a defensive tackle as high as the second round. So that's where I'm leaning, because I want to start building in the trenches too.
Yep.
And so those three guys stood out to me. There are a number of others, but those are the ones that were like younger, up and coming players. And
there was one.
Levi was the first one. Levi was the one I was like, boy, he's ready to explode. And Milton was another one. And Osa Odigizua, he's
didn't his brother play for us?
He had the same name, so I assume
wasn't it Osa or something or other? Odigizua?
It was Oa.
Oa. Yeah, his brother played for us.
Yes.
And he never did anything.
And then one of the reasons why I think they'll sign one of those two guys is the Giants always do this to me, because I always have to type these guys' names out. And I'm always like, damn it, I got it wrong.
So and
by the way, Cy does the same thing.
We couldn't get a Smith. We couldn't get a Smith.
Yeah.
The other guy to keep an eye on, his attitude is something that needs to be checked. I think he might have gotten an attitude check when he kind of got moved from two previous spots before he ended up in Minnesota, and that's Jerry Tillery. He's still pretty young. He's a guy who he's got size in terms of weight and strength, but he's also got length. Something we don't really have at defensive tackle. Our tackles are 6'2" and 320, 330, 340, 6'3", 6'4". We don't have a 6'5", 6'6" guy at defensive tackle. Bring a Jerry Tillery in, now you do. You got like a 285-pound guy who could be a defensive tackle, rush the quarterback kind of guy too, as well. So again, I think you could get him a little bit cheaper though, because this would be his fourth stop in the league.
And remember, in Hard Knocks, what are the two positions they wanted to deal with that they didn't fix? Defensive tackle and cornerback.
Right.
So I just throw that out there. I think they go heavy in defensive line. I'm hoping. So, all right. Linebackers. My issue with the linebackers, I think there's a lot of interesting names and some really good names. I just see the Giants not playing like most teams. When they go to the nickel and they play the nickel a lot, they don't play a lot of two linebackers. And I think Micah McFadden is a rising player for them. And they still have Bobby Okereke. And I think they've got some interesting guys on the roster behind them, Deontay Johnson and others, even Ty Summers. I think they've got some guys on the roster that they can spend their resources someplace else. So if the Giants were loaded, there were some guys that I might take a shot at, but I just don't see them spending their resources at inside linebacker in free agency. There are a lot of names, and I could name them, but I didn't bother because I just didn't think they're going to do it.
I think the only way that linebacker in free agency becomes a thing that the Giants do is, like you just said a little while ago, is if they decided that they're changing the way this defense plays. If it's now going to be more of a Titans defense versus the Wink Martindale version that we basically have seen, even under Bowen, it was still a variation of Martindale's defense. If we get back to more of a traditional 3-4 or even 4-3, if Burns and Tibbs become defensive ends, and I don't really see them doing that, you need different linebackers if you're going to do that.
Right.
I don't think we're going to do that because, again, you have a limited amount of resources and a little bit an amount of time. Those are two things that the Giants don't have a lot of. You don't have a full calendar year to install a completely new defense, and we can acquire players and figure out where they go. You've got what you've got. The season just ended. Free agency begins in 2 weeks, basically. And then you've got the draft right after that. And so you don't have a lot of time. So I think they're going to probably stick to a kind of maybe a scaled down version of the Martindale thing. I think you're right. Defensive tackle linebacker becomes not so important because the guys that you would get, Dre Greenlaw, It's going to be too expensive. No way that we're going to spend that kind of money at
Yeah, he was
linebacker.
one of the names I saw. Yeah.
Zach Bond with Philadelphia, was with New Orleans before that. Willie Gay, Devin Bush. We're not going to get those guys. The one guy that I would consider though is Jamin Sherwood of the Jets. The reason being is I think he'd be cheap. B, he can play special teams quite a bit, and he's a borderline linebacker safety. If I remember correctly, he came out of Auburn.
Okay.
And so he's probably about a 225, 230-pound playing weight kind of guy. So you could get an Isaiah Simmons kind of play out of him if you went that route.
And
So
our new secondary coach is a Jets coach, former Jets coach, which is going to come into play, by the way, when
in a
we talk
minute.
about
In a minute.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you. I just don't see linebacker. If anybody for me, it would be Sherwood, but I just don't see linebacker in free agency.
Okay, so because we want to keep this moving. All right, so big picture, because this is where I want to spend the bulk of the time. So big picture, again, I see the Giants having to spend money on quarterback. I see the Giants having to spend money on me personally on the defensive line, and the other place is the secondary in free agency. That's where I see, and there are a lot of guys in free agency at corner and at safety. The only thing I will throw out there at safety is the Giants did not spend money on Julian Love, and they did not spend money on Xavier McKinney. So some of the numbers that were being thrown around in speculation of what these safeties are going to make in free agency, $15 million a year and stuff like that, I have somewhat of a hard time seeing Joe Schoen spending the money. I would look at them because I like safeties, but I'm not sure. There's a lot of safeties. I have a lot of safeties written down, and they're going to get paid. I'm just not sure that Joe Schoen's going to pay them. So,
agreed.
And it may help us out in retaining some of our own players in that sense too. It just depends on how much, because we have Dane Belton, so it depends on how we're going to do there. But did you want to start off in the secondary, or did you want me to start off?
I'll let you go first on that one.
Okay, corners.
Yeah.
I know you like one of the guys that I mentioned because you asked for his picture. So
it's a tag team effort on creating those thumbnails.
Yeah, so I think we're going to. Treverius Ward sticks out to me like big time, and I think he had a down season. He had a family tragedy. He lost.
He did. He lost a kid.
Daughter. I think it was his daughter, 1 year old.
Yep.
I can't even imagine playing with that. But he is a player who is before that was a rising star. He is a good football player if he can get back. And I think I read one report that said he may be looking for a change of scenery because of the personal tragedy he experienced. And I can understand that he may just want to turn the leaf. Turn the chapter in his life. So he stood out. Byron Murphy with the Vikings stood out to me. I think he's a bit overrated, but DJ Reed, I know you asked for a picture on him too.
Yep.
DJ Reed, I think we have to look at seriously because our new secondary coach is coming from the Jets too. So, and then I had Carlton Davis down from the Lions. Those were the headliners. But there's a number of players. If you go down. There's another. I don't know if he was there when Dable was there, but Rasul Douglas with the Bills is on there. But there was a lot of corners. I think they come out with a corner. My guess is they're going to come out with a defensive tackle, and they're going to come out with a corner, and then the quarterback. That's what I'm pretty confident about.
I'm not so I'm not so sold on the defensive tackle only because I think that the draft is going to be where they go.
Well, you talked that.
And I think we're going to spend a lot of money on another position on offense. Of the corners that you mentioned, Ward would be my first choice. I just have a feeling he's going to have a lot of options. He's going to be in demand. DJ Reed has the natural connection to our new DB coach, so
he won't have to move.
But I actually feel there's a different position in the secondary that's going to have a connection where we're going to look.
Right.
I would look at Davis with Detroit. I would look at Asante Samuel of the Chargers. Asante Samuel Jr.
Junior. Right, and I put a check mark next to him as well too.
And the reason I say this, I'm not saying this is going to be the number 2 guy. I don't even know that we have a number 1 guy, by the way. I hate Deonte Banks. So
we got to come out as free agency in my mind with a corner. We got to come out with a corner.
I think here's the thing. If the Giants don't get where you looked at it, right, of the free agents, Asante Samuel would be the one guy that you would say he's a borderline maybe starter, right? Like he's a guy that you would say he's cornerback depth. He could be slot. He might play. He might be outside, but I don't count him as a starter. If they get a Davis, if they get a Ward, if they get a Reed, those guys you expect to be starters.
Right.
If the Giants don't do that in free agency, they may be tipping their hand about how much they like
Yes.
either the corner from Notre Dame or the cornerback from Michigan or the cornerback from Colorado.
Right.
That might really be telling in that case. But I have a feeling you're right. Now, remember, Cy on our show multiple times has mentioned Byron Murphy as a guy that he thinks the Giants should go and get.
Go ahead. Oh, I missed that, or I forgot that.
Yes,
Okay.
he felt that they should go get him.
Oh,
So
I'm
on
gonna
board.
pat myself on the back. I didn't remember.
You did, yeah. I thought that's where you were pulling that from.
Byron, I had Shavarius Ward 1 and Byron Murphy 2. Those were my two top guys.
I'm with you. So for corners, I would like Ward, but I think it's going to be Reed. So I'm going to go Reed 1, Ward 2, because Ward I just don't think we're going to get him, and then Murphy would be 3 for me.
Okay, but I think we're in agreement that if they spend money other than quarterback, they're going to spend money on cornerback.
Yeah, we have. Okay. It's funny too because that's of a position. Quarterback is a singular position. One player can play that position at one time. Cornerback, you need 2 and maybe 3 if you count the slot.
You need 3. We got a good slot guy.
So, and technically, as far as the standard 2 cornerback positions go, we don't really know that we have a starter on either side at the moment, based on what happened last year.
Right. And what's frustrating to a lot of Giants fans, and this does not just mean Shane, Giants fans are very upset with the fact, and they should be, that we've spent a lot of draft picks over the last 10 years on corners, including first-round draft picks.
Oh, yeah.
And it has, and so they're like, oh my God. And we still don't have anything to show for it. And we're talking about everything from the Eli Apples of the world to Christ. Who was the guy that didn't even make it because he stole? What's his name?
DeAndre Baker.
DeAndre Baker. I can't even.
Well,
I out of my mind.
If you go back,
and everyone in between. I mean,
if you go back further, it's lots of times it's the second corner that we take in a specific draft or a succeeding draft that is better than the guy we took early in the draft. Will Allen, Will Peterson. If Peterson didn't get hurt, Peterson was the better player and would have been. For us, would have been. Right. We had Terrell Thomas. I mean, these guys that when we draft them at corner, it's Sheldon White. Awful. Just awful.
But he was a safety.
Sheldon White, you're right. No. Adrian White was a safety.
Adrian White. Adrian White. You're right. Sheldon White. Yeah.
Sheldon White gave up the touchdown to Flipper Anderson in the playoff game.
Now, and the other thing is, because I want to keep this tight, safety's loaded. There are so many free agent safeties out there. There's Cam Bynum. There's Justin Reed. Trevon, is it Morig? Talanga Hufnega is out there. Javon Holland. Who's kind of been up and down. But you could go down the list.
Justin Simmons.
Yeah, there's a lot of safeties out there. The only thing I don't know, again, is does Joe Schoen reverse course and say, now I'm willing to pay a safety? And I don't know if he does that. But we need to get –
I think we do with one.
When I was looking – and I think I know who you're going to do. What I was looking at when I went to Pro Football Reference is when I looked up all these guys, I looked at 2 things: interceptions and pass defenses. I wanted to know who was getting their hands on the ball. So, of the good guys. So I looked at all of these guys, and I was looking at people that had a knack for making plays on the football, because we don't get any interceptions. We need to start getting guys in here that know how to play the football and get turnovers. So, and there are a lot of guys. So big picture is this for me: quarterback. I didn't see any wide receivers. There's the offensive lineman that I like because of his versatility. No tight ends, no running backs, but I want a defensive lineman. I want a corner. And the question mark was safety. I just don't know if Joe Schoen, I would sign a safety. But again, now we're getting into what I was saying earlier too. Joe Schoen's history is he only will spend 2-3 big contracts. in free agency period. He might change it this year, but he's been 2 or 3 big signings. So
which is why for me the safety that I want to get, I don't think is going to be overly expensive in the grand scheme of things. Where re-signing a Pinnock would be very expensive.
Right.
You're not getting
maybe.
I think it would be because he's not going to give you the hometown discount.
I thought we'd be over the barrel with him. Again, if we lose him, it's no big deal. I kind of like him. I just wish he would make some plays.
Sure. I like him.
But after looking at this list, there's a glut of safeties, and he's not prominently listed. He may not get the money he thinks he's going to get.
He might not, but I think he's going to want X amount of dollars from the Giants based on what he was getting paid before, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is the Giants have drafted 2 safeties. They've got Belton and Newman. They've been drafted.
Right.
They have another young guy that they could kind of consider maybe making his way there. But I think Ashton Davis with the Jets, he knows the system that the new DB coach is going to be bringing in.
Right.
He's going to be able to give whatever the way the coach is going to be giving it to the players. You're going to have a guy who can retell it to the other players because he knows that coach. You're going to want your guys in there. This always happens no matter who you bring in.
Right.
They want their guys. I think the Giants will get Ashton Davis, and I think they'll get him at a pretty cheap cost. If they get Reed, then you can forget Davis. You're not going to get both guys from the Jets. But if we don't go corner with Reed from the Jets, I think we do get Ashton Davis, and he could be the third safety. He comes a lot cheaper than what Pinnock will come at because, one, Davis just really hasn't done a ton. He's been serviceable, but he also brings special teams. Pinnock does not bring special teams.
Yeah, so I was actually wondering if we could nab both the Vikings guys, Bynum and Murphy. So you know how you said we won't get both guys from the Jets, and when I was doing this, I was like, maybe we can get both the guys from the Vikings. So it shows you how things can change. I remember one of my friends is a big Vikings fan, and I remember for years he bitching about how bad the Vikings secondary was. It shows you can fix these positions if you know what you're doing.
Right.
So I think that's it for the wrap up for the free agent preview. I think.
Yeah. So some closing thoughts for me, and I'll say this: the reason why I will argue with anybody. I know so many people, Giants fans, but BBI, BigBlueInteractive.com, are arguing how they're against the possibility of a Matthew Stafford or even against an Aaron Rodgers. The fact that you have to give up some draft capital and you're going to give money and the guy's older. Here's what I'll say to that and why I don't agree with anybody's position on this about when you just say no. When you just say no, I'm like, what the hell is your answer then? It's one thing to say, I don't think that's a good idea, and here's some reasons why, but I could see, it's kind of like politics in a way. I could see you're either a whole bunch against or you're a whole bunch for, but no one sees the middle, and here's the middle. A Matthew Stafford, is going to be the best quarterback we've had in a while, without question, regardless of his age. He's without question the best quarterback we've had in a while.
Unquestionably, yes.
He brings a reputation with him. He brings some gravitas with him. We can bring some other people over.
Correct.
It gives you the ability to move in the draft. Right now, if you go to the draft and we don't have a legit guy who could be the quarterback, and don't give me Justin Fields or any of that other bullshit, then you are 100% locked in with, if it's Ward or Sanders sitting here at 3, you got to take them. If you don't, then you've left yourself with a cupboard bare and a guy who was the equal of Daniel Jones. You should have just kept Daniel Jones.
That's the issue that I pointed out a couple of episodes ago that not enough people are focused on is the month period of time between free agency and the draft. Is they're going to telegraph what they can and can't do based on what they do at quarterback. Exactly what you just said. So it's not like the draft and the free agency are together. They're not together. So we're going to know what the Giants are going to probably do. And so is the rest of the league. Is going to know what the Giants are going to do based on what they do in the trade/free agent market. And they will be limited too, as John is suggesting, if they don't get the quarterback in free agency or trade, and they don't get the quarterback and those two quarterbacks go 1-2 in the draft,
even
then you're up shit's creek. Now this is not good. So you're acting out of the wrong reasons. This is why I'm saying the Giants. This is why I'm going to swear here. This is why the fucking Colts game mattered, because now we're in a position where we can't ensure that we don't have that guarantee get out of jail free card right
so
now.
I'll say this, and I I disagree. And the reason I disagree is this: we don't know what anybody for real in Giants Central actually thinks about Ward and Sanders.
No, that's correct. That's correct.
They might not even if we had lost that game and we were drafting higher, we still might be going Matthew Stafford, by the way. And here's why I think it's so important that we do something significant at quarterback beforehand. You just nailed it a second ago, but you did it from only one half of the perspective. That perspective is what happens if we don't get the guy, we go to the draft and the first two picks happen and both quarterbacks go. Well, the other perspective to that is we go to the draft and the Giants go, oh shit, we don't have a quarterback. Tennessee, you know what? We'll give you 3, we'll give you 34, and we'll give you 1 next year. And all of a sudden you've mortgaged your future just to move up for the guy because you're desperate because you know you've got nothing.
So
Matthew Stafford's not a Band-Aid. Matthew Stafford is literally an antibiotic. It will get us through, and it gives us the ability. We can take Ward. We could take Sanders if we want to at 3. We could take Hunter. We could take Carter. It's whoever's available at 3 at that point. Or we go, hey, guess what? Sanders is there. We don't really want Sanders. Hey, Vegas, you want him? Come on up. We want your 1 next year. And we'll drop down and we'll take your 1 and your 3 now and your 1 next year to do it, because now Vegas is desperate or the Jets are desperate. Whoever it is behind us, you need to take the desperation piece out of this. Stafford's not a desperation move. It is a move for them to try to win games. The desperation move is if we move up to 1. That's desperation.
I think sometimes you come up with good word choices. Antibiotic. I like. It's an antibiotic against doing something stupid, is what it is. So you kind of talked me a little bit into it just with that explanation. Look, I completely understand, because I got blowback on the website about you're agreeing with John. He's an idiot about.
Thank you, Gio in New Jersey.
About.
He loves me.
About it doesn't make any sense to bring Stafford in here. I get that argument, and I'm kind of in that. I've got 1 foot clearly in that thing. I know Matthew Stafford's 37. You're probably going to get 2 years out of him, and then it's like, why are we postponing the inevitable again? One of John's major arguments here. I'm going to do the negative.
Include the idiot part.
I'm going to do the negative. No, but because remember he came out and said, and then he said, well, Eric said the same damn thing. I'm like, no. If you watch the last episode, I was like, because if you go in the comments section of the YouTube channel, there are people. Yeah. Eric, you're wrong. John's right. So
it's so funny.
Look. There is no clear-cut answer here. I know for a fact that if we get Matthew Stafford and he stays healthy and he doesn't drop off a cliff, just a couple ifs there, he's by far the best quarterback we've had since Eli Manning was in his prime. All right, he's good. He's going to be really good. My concern is he's not going to be here that long, and are we going to win enough games to keep us from getting the quarterback? So part of me says, and I know Shane and Dable won't do this because there's too much at risk for them. Part of me says draft 2 quarterbacks this year. Draft 1 at 3 and draft another one in the 3rd round, and just draft kind of what the Redskins did a few years ago when they drafted Schuler. Wasn't Schuler, and who's the guy that had Farrat? Wasn't he the second?
Yes, he was the second guy. Yeah. Yes.
So, and Farrat ended up being the better player for them. So almost sometimes when you draft,
they did the same thing with RG3 and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah,
they were in the same draft.
So I'm almost like, let's do this. Let's just get our guy, and let's we had an episode recently where we talked about how the Giants back in the day used to draft at one position when they Joe Morris, Butch Wolfel.
Yeah.
Cluster draft. Part of me says we gotta fix this. Let's take 2 shots at this. If they pan out, we'll do it again next year. But we got to fix the quarterback. But what you just said is very persuasive. if you have a quarterback in your hands, it prevents Shane from doing something incredibly stupid and trading up and giving up next year's number one, which very well could be the first pick in next year's draft in a quarterback-rich draft. So if we, and I've said this for I think 2 months now, if we go into this draft and we trade away next year's number one, I will be beside myself. I will be so beside myself. I can't imagine doing anything more stupid than trading away next year's number one, because this isn't a great draft. You can get some good players in this draft, but this isn't a great draft. So why would you trade away next year's number one in a deeper draft, which looks like a deeper draft at a quarterback position too, to move up in a weaker draft where people aren't even sure that these quarterbacks are franchise? It makes no sense to me.
I think two things. I'm going to give you one, and then I'm going to give you bulletin board material for the next one. The drafts are one of two things. They're either what people say deeper, and they don't really mean deeper. They mean top heavy.
Yeah.
Top heavy drafts when there's a lot of, like, these guys are, number one players could drift all the way down into the second round and they could be first round players, but then it kind of trickles off in some positions that almost have nobody. But a deeper draft lasts longer where you get depth players. And that draft is really about building the roster.
Right.
You maybe get one superstar out of a draft. If you're lucky, you get like 3 or 4 really good starters. Giants nailed it. 86, 89, we had great drafts. 88 wasn't a great draft, but we picked up 2 offensive linemen that became starters. One was supposed to be the starter at offensive tackle. He ultimately played more guard than tackle, and Eric Moore. Jumbo Elliott became the starter at tackle. But if you look at like 86, the Giants loaded their defense up. They had Eric Dorsey, Eric Howard, Pepper Johnson, Greg Lasker, Mark
And
Collins.
they were already strong on defense, and they loaded up on defense.
You loaded all that stuff up. In 89, the Giants got Brian Williams. They got Bob Cratch. So we got 2 offensive linemen. We've got Dave Meggett, Howard Cross, Greg Jackson, Myron Guyton. I mean, you loaded up that team. But are those players like perennial Pro Bowlers and going to the Hall of Fame? No, but they were fundamental players to a championship team. That's what the draft says. So I think this is a deeper draft that way. In terms of, like, I think you're going to get depth players
at positions,
but no, I don't think there's so many superstars. I think there's only a few. Here's the bulletin board material. I'm going to tell you this right now, and I'm willing, and all of you can call me on this. If one part happens and the second part doesn't, you can rake me over the coals.
I'm going to get the gasp ready here.
So get ready, because this, and I'll make a short of this later. If the Giants trade for Matthew Stafford, the Giants will make the playoffs next year, at least as a wild card team. I guarantee it. They will make it. I also think if they get Matthew Stafford, we are trading out of the 3rd pick. We're trading down, and we're going to get a pick in the first round next year. I think you could see what they're going to do. If we go Stafford, I think we're going to go older in general. I think we're going to bring another older player in to work with him, because we're trying to win. The draft needs to be us positioning ourselves for the go forward. And if you only take a guy at 3, and I like Carter, I would absolutely be happy with getting him, but then I limit the amount of extra picks I can pick up later. So I'm just saying, if we get Matthew Stafford, this team is making the playoffs next year.
Oh, boy. Oh, wait. All right. So if they do Stafford, I think for better or worse, they are going to try to become a playoff team, obviously, this year or next year.
Yep.
And if not, that's the end of the regime, and we'll have to see what kind of damage they did. So I can see that, but that explanation is what I said earlier. They believe that if they fix quarterback, the Colts game was a format that they can follow. Like, again, Daboll said, give me a quarterback, and this is what you're going to do. Right. I personally don't believe that. If he does that, fantastic. But I'm concerned about Shane Bowen's defense. I'm concerned about the fact that Daboll seems to have lost his mojo the last 2 years. We'll see that, but he's coaching for his life. Shane's GMing for his life. But it's unquestionable, if they sign Stafford, they're going to go the veteran approach. Like you said, they'll probably bring in a veteran wide receiver too, to try to again compete with the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Commanders and go from there. So I agree. I think they're going to do that. Whether that's the right thing, I have serious doubts. But I can very easy. The one thing I agree with you too is if they do bring in Stafford, I think it's much more likely they trade down from 3 because they're going to have to accumulate more picks to make up for the picks that they gave up to get Stafford. Even if it's just the 3, God forbid, it's the 2. If they trade away the 2, then they got to trade down. They have to trade down and try to get that pick back. God, I hope they don't give up the 2 because that's.
I don't see 2.
But
unless we get
a combination of picks, I think you're right. I think they got to trade back. So
I think you have to. And I'll say this: we talked about in the other show, and I don't know if you're having margaritas made here shortly.
Yeah, can you hear that? Hey, stop with the thunder.
So we talked about in the last show. If you had Matthew Stafford from the get-go, I don't think Dayball's premise is incorrect. There's a number of games early in the season that we would have won with a better quarterback. With a better quarterback in games that were fairly close, the difference was we just didn't have a guy who could make the plays when they were there. He didn't fumble the ball away or throw a pick-6 touchdown, but there were plays that the offense could have made, and they just didn't. And with a Matthew Stafford, I think you do make those plays. Okay. And I think you take chances that you wouldn't have taken with a Daniel Jones because now you have confidence that this guy, even if he makes a mistake, we'll get the ball back later and he's gonna do something with it. So that's why I think and the reason I also believe it's very important is I don't want the pressure of having to stay at 3. I want to be able to move, and I want to move down. I want to be able to move around and accumulate things for next year. So if I'm going to try to win this year, you do that by acquiring veterans now. If I want to build long term, I get more picks this year for next year. And that's what I want to do, and that's what I believe in. And that's why I believe Matthew Stafford is the quarterback.
They get Stafford, they better win. They better win because if they don't win, everybody's gone. Everybody's gone. And they know that, I guess. So maybe that's why they're doing it, but everybody's gone. John Merrill won't be gone. John Merrill have his medium Pepsi with
maybe Floyd Mayweather or whoever buys the 10% of the team that apparently is out there. But so we'll wrap that up. We just to give some. We'll do a couple shows next week. Very soon. When the immediate tampering period begins on March 10th, we will come on live. I've taken time off from work so that I could be available. We will be live.
Yeah, we'll be live.
You're looking live.
Yeah, we're looking live at the Meadowlands.
So that'll be. Oh God, I miss those days of Brent Musburger doing that.
You're looking live at the Meadowlands.
So we have that coming up. We'll try to do more draft stuff as we go a little further, maybe get some draft folks on. We've talked about, we'll get side back, but we want to get some flavors of some other people as well. We'll get some other Giants podcast. We're going to be on somebody else's Giants show coming up here very shortly. And then we'll be live for the draft. So we got a lot of stuff coming up. So, unless you have something to throw out there.
No, we went way too long again. Sorry, guys.
No, it's all good. It's 2 episodes into 1. So with that being said, subscribe, please. We're getting close. We've got 800. Last I checked, 809 subscribers. Keep subscribing. We love it. And we'll catch you again very soon. Thanks for watching.